Sometimes some of the best things are tiny, like just a little bronze mouth. Well, I have an exhibition at a gallery which is run by 3 young people, 2 Swiss and 1 German. And they have a gallery on Dover Street in London, and they've opened a space in New York on the Lower East Side. The name of the gallery is the NFT Gallery, which I think is a horrible mistake, which I've told them regularly, and I think they're going to rebrand their space in the fall. And the problem is, I mean, we live in a digital world, and we're having somewhat of a digital renaissance, but the nomenclature, the words you use, I mean, I've been making art that employs technology since the early 90s. I showed my first animation in 1993, and then I proceeded to make large-scale computer prints on vinyl in the mid-90s. I showed an artist, Wade Guyton, in 1997. He's now famed for selling computer prints on prime linen that sell for millions. And when I showed him, he didn't have a computer printer yet at the time. And he's probably one of the first artists to aestheticize technology. But I think that it's the role of contemporary art to talk about social, political, economic, and for me, the culture of technology, how technology pertains to all of our lives. And now more than ever with artificial intelligence, and the issues are really coming to the fore. However, the contemporary art world is among the most backward-looking and conservative industries, and I've been in many over the course of my now very long life. I've been in the financial world, in the fashion world, I've worked in the legal profession, and nothing prepared me for how backward-looking the art world really is. I mean, if what COVID I would say that COVID accelerated the art world's usage of technology by a factor of 10 years. Now they call them online viewing rooms. I would say they're glorified websites, but there's nothing terribly glorified about them. So in a way, like for me, when I found out 3 years ago about NFTs, I wasn't interested on any level in blockchain, in currency, cryptocurrency. It held no interest for me. But immediately upon learning of art sold via the blockchain in the form of non-fungible tokens, even though I wasn't quite fully comprehending what it entailed, nevertheless, it immediately appealed to me because I've been making digital art, or I've been utilizing digital means for 30 years. And it clicked and made perfect sense. When I would sell a video over the preceding decades, I would sell a USB stick with some videos on it. I could barely remember what was on them. I would call them an edition of 3. I would put them in a little box that I would make to make them resemble art. And it just, ultimately, it doesn't make any sense. And if you think of some of the most profound artists that have employed videos during the course of Steve McQueen, the British artist and filmmaker, his auction record is $30,000. His work should be selling into the millions. But until there are dedicated devices for the display of digital art where you can live with them and coexist on the same basis as a drawing or a painting, that's really still the primary mode of artistic expression that is collected and collectible. Even though, I mean, paintings are always the most marketable because they're easy to transport and store, largely in free ports. But digital art is even easier to store. But people still have, whenever anything is new or unfamiliar, it's human nature, it's a defense mechanism to push back, to reject. So I'm making one of the works I'll be showing in the exhibition is called Pop Principle, and it relates to a few different factors. One is this kind of gulf that divides the traditional art world and the digital artists or art world, NFTs. And now the name also reflects the fact that the art market is largely a popularity contest that has little, if anything, to do with the art itself. So I'm having a show which will be comprised of sculpture, photography, paintings, possibly. There's a tapestry which tapestries came into existence literally thousands of years ago. It's one of the oldest art forms known to man and woman. And yet, because it's going to be pigeonholed into an NFT gallery, I'm going to lose half the audience that I would have if it was in a regular art gallery. So the show will have a series of different bodies of work. One of them is this sculpture that I'm really excited about, which is based on a T-Rex dinosaur skeleton, which I've had fabricated, and it really relates to the fact that over the last 3 or 4 years, the art market is a very strange, fickle beast, and it has its own language, its own machinations, its own way of communicating and doing business. And a recent phenomenon has been to put incongruous things and like hybridizing these types of material that gets sold at auctions. So there's been a Leonardo da Vinci that was sold in a contemporary art auction along with a Warhol Last Supper. And recently they've been putting dinosaur skeletons in contemporary art sales. And I find that really objectionable for a lot of reasons. You're making like selling these skeletons which belong to the public. They're dug out of the ground and they should be used for scientific research or to share with the public in a natural history museum or in an academic institution for research projects. And instead, these things become baubles for rich people at a Christie's sale. So I've recreated a dinosaur skeleton in fiberglass that I've worked with a Chinese company to fabricate. And then for the head, I've taken a manipulated file that I made on the computer and had it 3D printed that will be the head of the skeleton. And that's one of the pieces that will be in the exhibition. So, again, the art world is very much about compartmentalization. So I'm a person that can't readily be categorized or pigeonholed into any particular. I write, I teach at University of Zurich and various schools in the United States, and I've curated and do all of these different things, including have dealt the art out of the curatorial projects that I organized. So the art world doesn't know what to make of me. Mostly they just think I'm a pain in the ass, which is true, granted. But I just think that, historically a dilettante was a good thing. And if you do things with love and passion, and I absolutely love art, it courses through my circulatory system. It's a shared language that I have to communicate with my children. I mean, 2 of my 3 kids are making art, and I lost one of my kids, so I have 3 now, and he was an artist as well. And if it wasn't for art and my other children, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you. Art is solace. Art is a sustenance. I mean, I used to joke when I was curating a lot of projects with emerging artists. Cecily Brown, who has a show at the Metropolitan Museum, I curated in her first group show ever in 1996. I mentioned Wade Guyton, an artist, Janine Antoni and Andrea Zittel, and Joe Bradley. I organized his first ever exhibition. And I always used to joke while I was curating, wearing my curator hat, that artists sometimes suck the air right out of your mouth. They're always looking over your shoulder for who's more important in the room and using you as a stepping stone. And I would joke like they act like they're curing diseases. And in fact, there's been clinical studies that coexisting with art actually has ameliorative health effects, that it reduces anxiety and blood pressure. So living with art is like when you see a dog being inserted into like an old age home. Living with art helps you live longer and makes you feel better. And when we're surrounded by so much hatred and so much violence in the world, especially in this country, I just wish more people cared about art. And why there's so much resistance to these 3 letters, which are like among the most NFT, it's ridiculous. I mean, yes, there were some environmental implications early on, which have been addressed largely through subsequent versions of the Ethereum cryptocurrency. Tezos has been green from day one, and Solana and Polygon. These are all means of exchange that have no detrimental effects by excessive computer usage. So as someone who loves technology, not as a programmer or a coder, I live in 2023, and I want to be present in my time with a view towards what's next. I mean, just to see the way people are up in arms about artificial intelligence and image making through artificial intelligence, text generation through artificial intelligence. I mean, it's the same way people reacted when the camera was introduced as a tool for art that artists employ. Artists are very opportunistic. The idea of an artist is to grab what surrounds them and to use it and to use it as a means of implementation for expression. Art is a human expression and communication. So why wouldn't you want to deploy artificial intelligence or the blockchain for art? And then people, I made a music video, which, I mean, I'm constantly humiliating my children on a regular basis. One of the ways over the past couple of years was I made a music video which was about all of the hatred directed towards NFTs. And I just find it really suspect that this is just really, NFTs for me are two things. One is a system to buy and sell digital works, and with certainty of authenticity on the blockchain. And another way, I mean, if you use the actual technology as the underlying content of your work, then the NFTism, which is a word I coined, becomes an art form itself. I wrote a book on NFTs with a scholar from Cambridge, and then during the course of writing the book, which I found to be excruciatingly difficult in relationship to the kind of art world investigative journalism that I've done in the past, and I just found it very hard to look retroactively at a field that changes with the velocity of like dog years, where 1 year in technology is like 15 years in real life. And it was a block for me, and it was very difficult. And then I had this idea, like I worked with the company Async, where I gave a lecture to this platform, and they have a dynamic technology. So I had this idea to have a book that's an open book that never closes. Because technology is changing in real time with such a rate of speed, why not make a book that never closes, that's always open? And because of this new smart contract that the company devised, I curated a group of 20 people to participate, writing pro thoughts of NFTs and negative thoughts of NFTs. And these people were disparate and included Krista Kim, who's a well-known NFT digital art crypto artist like Krista Kim, Sarah Mayohas, a group called Operator, 2 women that collaborate making works together, Kevin Abash, and then people that would never do something of Hans Ulrich Obrist, the Swiss curator, and Jerry Saltz, the critic, the total of 20 people. And they've made initial contributions to this book. And then the book changes over time. So this part of this project will be exhibited during my exhibition called Slow Food. And people will be able to write on sheets of paper that will be present during the course of the exhibition. And those contributions that people will make with a pen on paper by hand will be scanned and become part of this ever-changing book. So you'll be able to buy NFTs super inexpensively on a very non-invasive cryptocurrency technology that trades with little or no transaction fees, which could be extremely prohibitive in the crypto space. And the contributions will ultimately form part of the book. And if, like Duchamp said, that art should have a shelf life of 50 years in a museum and then be chucked past its sell-by date. And when you think of an artwork, you think of like a photograph or a painting or a sculpture that radiates its artiness in a one-way conversation. And now with this new smart contract technology, the art that you own will actually transform over time. So it's all, in that sense, it's a whole new definition of what art could be or is. And that to me is very, very exciting. I'm not young, but I've always been open to change. And I think that keeps me young, it exercises my brain, it keeps me vital, and it gets me excited. And I am the negative side to all of my practice, and I'm very aware of, I'm self-aware and critical about what I say and what I do. And I had a tattoo that said NFTism, and then I changed it to PostNFTism when, like, in 2 short years, for me, NFTism was the community, the collaboration, and the conversations that I was encountering that I hadn't seen in the contemporary art world in 20 years. I used to joke that I ran away from big business to be in the art world, and then the art world became bigger than the business I was running away from. So post-NFTism for me was the fact that in 2 years, the NFT space copied some of the worst attributes of the contemporary art world. Greed, speculation, the fact that whoever's the most popular or fashionable has the biggest market, which is very similar to like going to a contemporary art auction today, seeing which young artists are the soup du jour. But anyway, so still, I'm very optimistic about the future of art that relates to technology, NFTs. I mean, there was a terrible recession that started last June in the crypto space. Even though my earnings tanked like 90%, maybe 98%, I thought it was the best thing that ever. I welcomed it because the crypto market needed a deep clean. And it got it, and that gets rid of a lot of the junk, and then people can stop chasing their tail and focus on the content. And yeah, I mean, some of the artists that I've loved the most over history, like Paul Tech, an American artist that died in 1988 of AIDS, and Vito Acconci, they died destitute. I mean, I always say the only thing worse than being born behind the time is to be too far ahead of your time, because the art market works on consensus so much. And success affirms success, whereas artists should be encouraged to experiment and to challenge themselves and their audience. And I think that art serves a role beyond beautification or aesthetics, and that it should provoke on a certain level or question things. And that's what I'm trying to do. Well, you spoke about like how do I make a living, or the money situation, which is a lot of people aren't terribly comfortable talking about their earnings, or I mean, people lie as much about how much they make as about the size of their private parts, probably. But during NFT, at the height of the market, I ended up selling like 11,000 NFTs. One was a series of 9,000, and then that I sold. But when the market crashed in June, my earnings went to zero from NFTs. And then I started using a different platform and Tezos, and I was selling the NFTs that I was selling for $3,000 to $20,000 for $5 to $200. And somehow selling something for $50 to $150 gave me the same satisfaction when I would find out that a piece sold. It was I derived the same sense of satisfaction as I did from selling something for 100 times that amount or whatever it was. But once I'm a late bloomer in general. I mean, the reason I never shut up now is that I had like a speech impediment when I was younger. I stuttered, so I couldn't really speak in public. I lost my mother when I was very young, and I was raised in the suburbs, which were less than 20 miles from where I'm sitting now in New York City, but it could have been 200 miles because it was so cut off, and it was such an alienated way to grow up. I never went to museums when I was younger, but I didn't know that art galleries existed, period. And in fact, I wasn't really cognizant of art as a vocation, profession. When I went to university in Washington, D.C., I started to attend a museum, in particular the East Wing of the National Gallery by I.M. Pei, which was filled with contemporary art. And it must have been absorbed into my subconscious, because I study philosophy, and for me, contemporary art is a kind of fleshing out of a philosophical ideational thought. And after I didn't know what to do with an undergraduate philosophy degree. There's no job. You can't even get a teaching job with an undergraduate degree. And I wasn't prepared to capitulate, to compromise. I wanted to figure out something to do with my life professionally that I would love. And there were no options. I didn't have anything that I loved other than studying philosophy. So I decided to go to graduate school for law with zero intention to practice, but I thought I would buy time. It would give me 3 years to focus on what it is I might be interested to pursue professionally. And then I worked a series of literally full-time jobs in school, and I told the people I was working for, my family, that I was in night school, but there was no night school. And then I worked in law firms, on the floor of the stock exchange. All the while, like, I was expressing myself through the negative, figuring out like what I didn't want to do. And I couldn't, to this day, I need my fingers for any mathematical computation. And so I knew I have no financial mind whatsoever. Sometimes I've done well, more often than not. But, and then I went into fashion, believe it or not. If you've seen me from the waist down, you would know why that didn't last. But I went to fashion business for a short period of time, and then I was procrastinating between jobs, and I was dragged to Warhol's estate sale in April of 1988. And I was expecting a load of Warhols, and I was not particularly fond of them at that time before I learned more about it. It's a lot of the things that I've grown to really appreciate in life were things that on first blush I didn't like. I didn't like Warhol until I took the time. The name of the show that I'm having next week is called Slow Food. And one of the things that I'm constantly reiterating is that art is a slow burning process. We live in this day and age of flick screens. Our attention spans are being like progressively programmed to be near non-existent, the size of a mosquito. And so I think, like, I didn't like Warhol in the beginning, but I grew to truly appreciate the scope of his genius. And I went to this estate sale to kill time between actually handing out my resume to look for a job. And it wasn't just Andy Warhol's work or his cookie jar collection or the jewelry hid under his clothes, but it was also his art collection, which he had done trades throughout his life with Jasper Johns and Hockney and Rauschenberg. And he had lots of Basquiat's, of course, because of their collaborative relationship. At the same time, Sotheby's was preparing for their May sale simultaneously. And that was the first time in my life that I ever saw that art could be bought and sold. Like, I call myself not an idiot savant, but an idiot savant, because I'm completely self-taught and have no education whatsoever in the arts until I started teaching. I started teaching to learn. I couldn't bear to go to school after graduate school, so I got hired for 6 lectures at the new school on probation, and the dean that hired me left, and I was in the books as an adjunct professor, and I've been teaching ever since. And I've taught at Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Art Institute of Chicago. I'm teaching at the Venice Biennale next week of architecture with Zaha Hadid's practice. We've done a metaverse space together. And really, for me, teaching it starts with me wanting to constantly learn and push myself to expand my thinking and my understanding of the world and the art in particular. And I love to inspire other students, because the word the art world knows most is the word no. No, you can't do this, say this, behave like this. And my whole career has just been about uncovering a lot of the hypocrisies that I see in the art world, and then helping students see another side, which is the inspirational side. And NFTs are a great tool to empower people to make their own way. So I created a role for myself in the art world. I started organizing shows for 2 reasons: to stick my own work in the context of my peers, and they were pretty good peers at the time, even though I couldn't give a Cecily Brown away for literally $1,200. I had 2 paintings for $1,200 each. I couldn't sell them, and I couldn't afford to buy them at the time, which was unfortunate. But that was the way I was able to carve out. I created my own role for myself as a curator. Then I would sell the work. I mean, I couldn't sell drugs to a drug addict, but I found one guy who used to own the tie. I worked in the fashion world I was spreading out ties on tables across tiny little stores in the East Coast of America. And the man was a compulsive gambler who went out of business, who was the owner of the company, but he was financed by this collector of very contemporary art. And that man ended up to support me for nearly a decade into when I started curating. I would curate a show, put my own work in it, and I would only have one. If there wasn't a dealer here or a dealer there that would buy something, this guy who was like a professional collector, he supported me and he enabled me to have. So I invented a role for myself because I wanted to live amongst art and artists, and that was really it. And then the teaching came to help educate myself about the past, about art once it came off the wall of the cave, and yeah. So also, like with about 10 years ago, I started inserting my videos and my two-dimensional computer manipulations of imagery into my writing at ArtNet. So when no one would show me in an art gallery because I had no market and nobody would consider me an artist in traditional terms. So I just started I was making my work from the end of the 80s, putting them in my shows when I was curating. Then, I was curating, I was cleaning the fucking floor, the toilet, gallery sitting, curating the show. I did everything. And that's a young person. I lost the energy to do that after 15 years. I moved to the UK in 2004, and I continued to make stuff. I forged a relationship with Zaha Hadid just because I was in awe of her brain. And then I started putting my own videos into my writing. So I was illustrating my own writing in the way a political cartoonist would do so. And that was a way that I had a guaranteed audience because I was the only one with the ignorance or courage to write the articles I've written. And then I would just embed my own artworks.